Back in October of 2012, there's an organization called LIFE, which is an acronym that stands for Living Independently Forever. It's a group home for adults with learning difficulties. They organized a trip to Washington, D.C. And like other trips to D.C., this group visited the National Mall, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Smithsonian, and Arlington National Cemetery. The two young women helped organize this trip. Their names were Lindsay and Jamie. They were caregivers for these adults. Lindsay and Jamie had been friends since elementary school and were now in their late 20s. They thrived in creating activities for these very special people by lighting up their lives with knitting clubs and painting groups and indeed small trips. And Lindsay and Jamie, like so many young people, keep a running joke, a running gag between them, and it's a visual joke. For those of you who don't know, the word is a meme. It means something that's visual, often a pun or ironic in some. It's what the kids are doing these days. It's a nice thing that people have between them. So they're sharing these things with each other, and the way that they would do this is they would take pictures, funny pictures, ironic pictures of themselves, and text them back and forth, or sometimes put them online. Like, one of them pretended to smoke a cigarette in front of a sign that said, "No smoking." Right? Or they would go in front of a famous sculpture or statue and try to imitate the pose very ironically. So you can imagine what they did when they were traveling in Europe together and saw the famous sculpture of David. Well, this is what they did. They took photos and they passed them back and forth. It was a running gag for years and years. So when they went to the Arlington National Cemetery and Lindsay saw a sign, it was black and it had brass letters and it said "Silence and Respect." When she saw it, inspiration struck. She quickly ran over to it in a moment of complete thoughtlessness, decided to pose in front of it by pretending that she was screaming and swearing, all while flipping the bird. Jamie took a picture, they shared it with each other, they even posted it on Facebook to their modest group of friends. You just imagine her in front of this picture that's a sign that says "Silence and Respect," being ironic and thinking she's being very funny. Except the sign was placed there for a reason. Anyone who's ever gone to the cemetery knows that sign. It's not all over the cemetery. It's actually just in one location. It's posted outside its most sacred place, in a place that's called the Tomb of the Unknown. It's a burial place where remains of veterans that have yet to be identified are kept. It's a solemn place, and some would say it's a sacred place. There's always a soldier on duty there at full attention. Make sure that we offer them the reverence that they deserve. And so the day the photo was taken, Jamie, with Lindsay's permission, put the photo online and shared it with her friends. And a few weeks later, while celebrating Jamie's birthday, their phones blew up with all sorts of dings and dongs and vibrates and messages. Someone had found that photo and brought it to the attention of hordes of online strangers, none of whom knew Lindsay or Jamie. And you can imagine what happened next. An outpouring of rage across the internet, tagging Lindsay in the photo. A new Facebook page called Fire Lindsay was created, and it attracted 12,000 followers. These online commentators started calling her out for being inappropriately irreverent. But within a few minutes, this page also became a meeting place of hate and shame. Instead of just holding her accountable, the comments became harsher, saying things like, "Lindsay Stone hates the military. She hates America. She hates soldiers. She hates people." Another said, "You're just pure evil." Spurred on by the shame, these commentators used the page to organize themselves to find out more about Lindsay, where she lived, where she worked. The comments kept coming and they kept getting worse, including calling her to be arrested, to be committed to an insane asylum, calls for her to be raped and to be killed. This all happened in one night. The morning after the birthday party, news cameras appeared in droves in front of her home, and it accosted her on her way to work. When she showed up to work, she was fired. Her boyfriend left her. She barely left the house after that. Lindsay couldn't find work for over a year. When she did find a new job, she never socialized with coworkers because maybe her new employer would find out what she did, and then she would lose that job too. Since the incident happened, she hasn't dated anyone because she felt too afraid to trust others with her story. Let's be clear, what Lindsay did was wrong. And as a veteran and as a rabbi, it bothers me a great deal that someone would be so thoughtless in such a sacred place like the tomb of the unknown. It was morally wrong. Even though she didn't actually hurt anyone, what she did was against the norms of society and was irreverent in the most inappropriate ways. Hence, it was morally wrong. But it was one moment of being wrong. A single moment in a young woman's life where she made a mistake. The response to this single moment went on, though, forever and ever. It was a tsunami of shame and pillory. She said over and over again that she regretted and was sorry for what she did. She released a statement, official statement of apology. Jamie took the post down off of Facebook. But as one of the trolls sarcastically said after she deleted the post, quote, "Sorry, Jamie, your post lives on forever." And he posted it again to his own page. After being called out for one thoughtless moment, she became trapped in her fear, now playing out over and over again across the globe forever. I've been thinking a lot about this story and the culture that we've built that allows for stories like this to exist. A call-out culture been taking over our lives. For those that don't know, call out means naming people publicly you think have done something wrong. Someone we know, or maybe we don't know, or maybe someone we think we know, makes a mistake or says something we don't like, and we call them out and shout their name and tell the world just how wrong they are. Basically, it's the story of Lindsay. But it's the story of so many people. Famous and not famous, people who have made a mistake in their lives, and because of the culture we live in, they can never, ever be forgiven. Their actions are never forgotten. The past is not just the past, and there is no future for them because they couldn't get rid of the past, and their life is ruined forever. Lindsay's just one story, but there are many more. Political gaffes, mistakes in judgments, inappropriate moments, all pounced on and ground into dust. Each can be isolated as a single phenomenon, but together they make an entire culture. A call-out culture that allows us just to wait for other people to mess up so we can unleash our own indignation upon them. A culture that rewards us for shaming each other. A culture that tells us that our own fury is righteous if we can just shame each other into paranoid silence. I see it here, in this congregation. I see this culture. I see it around Shabbat dinner tables and in meeting rooms. I see it in our larger community, in boardrooms and chat rooms. I see it globally online. A called-out culture searches for our worst moments, terrible mistakes, and holds it up to our face and says, "You are nothing more than this one moment. You cannot move on with your life because everything you are to me is only this. And you will not be nothing more to the world than only this." It's this culture of calling out I want to discuss today. Why do we do this? How did we get here? Has religion or other systems played roles in this? How can we change, if at all? And on this most holy day of Yom Kippur, on this day of reflection and forgiveness and repentance, it's time to call it out, this call-out culture. It's time to flip the script. Instead of calling each other out, it's time to call ourselves out, to lay bare real truth and hopefully activate something inside of us to grow, to heal, and to step into a different place, a holy place. Now, I don't know anyone who likes being called out. Sometimes we all do things that we think are just against the rules, but we actually hurt other people. Like the time I was a teenager and I came home late for curfew. I was having a great time, and you see there was this girl, and I just didn't want to go home. This was before cell phones, so I didn't have to call or text. And I guess this is one of those very few instances where we can say that we had it better than our kids. So I pulled up to the house. It was dark. I got out of the car, tiptoed to the back door, unlocked it. I took my shoes off on the patio because I didn't want to make too much noise. I came in. I walked through the kitchen, through the living room, 30 feet from my door to my bedroom. It was dark. It was quiet. I was almost there. Noah! I wake you up. Get over here right now. Busted. I got called out. Called my name right out. I certainly didn't like that. But I didn't know then what I know now, and I think what most of us know now. When we don't come home on time, we actually scare our parents. We can hurt them. We can take relationships for granted. There are lots of times when we get called out like this. Like maybe you drink milk out of the carton. Or you left your socks on the couch. Or you didn't put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher, but left them on the counter next to the dishwasher. Or maybe you said something overly rude at a dinner party. Or maybe you didn't come home from work because you said you would. But because things got so busy and things got so busy again, and then you missed dinner and bath time again. Maybe you took advantage of a friend in business, or you lied out of shame, or you pushed a rumor just to create drama because the drama makes you feel relevant and important. In those moments when we are called out, we deserve it. I deserve to be called out after coming home late for curfew, or for leaving my socks on the couch. And I certainly deserve to be called out for leaving my dishes on the counter next to the dishwasher. I mean, it's just 6 inches more, and it would have been in the dishwasher. I deserve that. And we should all come home to family. And we should slow our speech. Being called out is a reminder that we can do better. It's a reminder that we made a commitment in love to another person. It's a reminder that we live in a covenant with them, a lifelong relationship that is as accountable and deep as it is loving. Being called out like that is part of what it means to be a covenanted person, to have a covenant with friends and with family and even with God. But that's not the kind of call-out culture I'm speaking about. I'm talking about the kind of culture that destroys lives, destroys communities, and destroys the future. A culture we built and we're responsible for. A culture that we have crafted and created and now live in. This reminds me of a law from the Torah. It speaks about this idea of this culture that we've built. The Torah says when you build a new house, you're supposed to put a guardrail around the roof. Because if you don't, you'll incur what's called blood guilt upon your house. You're liable if you don't put a guardrail around your roof. The teaching's clear enough. One must put up a guardrail to prevent others from falling off the roof. But the Midrash adds that if you fail to build the guardrail on your roof, it's considered a bad house. And if you choose to go up on the roof and fall, you actually deserve to fall, because you know you built a bad house. This is the idea that we should not be surprised if we created a bad house and bad things happen in that house. The culture of calling out is exactly this kind of house that we built. A bad house. We built an entire global culture that is lurking for things to be angry at. A culture that waits for others to mess up. A house whose foundation is fury, whose cornerstone is contempt, whose banisters are bitterness, whose walls and windows are wickedness, and whose roof is ruin. When we build a bad house, we should not be surprised by the life that is lived in that house. Is it so shocking to us that when we create a culture that searches with gusto for people's worst moments and then lay waste to their souls, that we find ourselves in a soulless world? Is it so surprising that when we spend our time destroying other people, but with their mistakes, that the world itself is not destroyed? Is it really a wonder that when we foment shame and disgrace, and we find ourselves now in a shameful world that seemingly has no room for grace? When you build a bad house, you will live in a bad house. When you build a world of darkness, you become the darkness. When you build a world of shame, you become shameful. We live in a culture that we create. If we build a bad house, then we deserve to fall off the roof. Our lives are our responsibility. We have built this call-out culture, and we have to tear it down and build something new in its place. And so let's tear it down. We might blame others for this call-out culture. We can blame social media. We can blame politics. We can even blame religion. It's natural. It's what we normally do. But it's also misplaced. All three systems share responsibility, but they are each created by us, but they are not us. Some of us blame social media. And since the dawn of the new information age, we can communicate more effectively, instantly, and globally than ever before. But we didn't foresee that the very thing that could bring us together into this world can also tear us apart. We can text our friends on the other side of the world. We can buy anything through our phone and have it delivered to our house. There's hardly a wedding, a bris, or a baby naming I do today that someone isn't video chatting from some other country, some other state, or even some other part of the city because they just can't get there. Yet, what has been heralded as a tool of mass communication has become a weapon of mass destruction. It's like an atom bomb in reverse. When the bomb goes off, chain reaction spreads destruction over hundreds of miles, killing millions of people. But when we call someone out online, when we target them and shame them, the opposite is true. Millions of people focus their ire in a chain reaction onto a single person, breaking them, tearing them down. Cities are destroyed by bombs, but souls are destroyed by tweets. In this call-out culture, we seek to own, to destroy, to ravage each other's point of view. Anyone can pass judgment on anyone anonymously without facts, truth, or moral judgment. In this unforgiving call-out culture, the people who survive the call-out apocalypse are those that thrive on it. People without shame. Those who are the loudest, care not for facts or morals. Those whose pugnacity and unrepentance is the core of their being. But we can't just blame social media. It's a tool that has tapped into something deeper in our psyche. Every time we read a post or a tweet, every time we click on an article, every time a friend or an influencer tells us to think a certain way, to hop on the call-out bandwagon, to add pain to pain, shame to shame, and hate to hate, every single time, we have to decide whether to go along with it. We decide to share. We decide to like. We decide to comment, not the screen. Social media is a system. It begins and ends with a screen in your hand or in front of your face, not inside your soul. Some of us want to blame politics. All the studies have shown that we're more politically divided than ever. Our politics have moved from simple anger to contempt. Anger is an emotion. You can be angry in the morning and not in the afternoon. You can be angry today, but not tomorrow. Contempt is different. Contempt is sticky. It endures. Contempt says that I don't just disagree with your ideas. I disagree with your humanity. A politics of protest. A politics of contempt. A politics that negates the souls of other human beings contributes to this bad house that we have built. Because we don't feel like we have any power, we can call each other out to feel powerful. We feel really good in calling each other out because it makes us feel like we are winning, even when we've done nothing to actually make a difference. Calling it out makes us feel righteous. But you can't only blame politics for calling each other out either. Politics is a system like social media for capturing the mood of America. Politicians, sorry Jesse and sorry to Paul, they don't just create culture, you live off of culture. And furthermore, politics only address outcomes, policy, not the deepest part of ourselves. There is still something deeper inside of us that needs to be addressed today. Needs to be questioned and torn down if we want to tear down this bad house. And finally, some of you might want to blame religion for helping this call-out culture too. And this one hits much closer to home. It's terrifying to think what that godly voice might say about us, especially if we're called out for somehow being naturally bad or for reminding us of our mistakes all the time. It's frightening to think that God thinks the worst of us, especially if we think the worst of ourselves already. And on a communal level, there are too many times in religious spaces where we call out congregants for messing up. I've met so many good people who feel uncomfortable in synagogues because they felt called out. They've been told that there's no place for them here. They've been told that what they believe or how they act or who they love is broken or wrong or unacceptable. I've sat with too many people who struggle with themselves and feel that they are not home in God's house. Some of you here know the sting of what it feels like to be called out, to feel alone, to sit while others stand, or stand while others sit, to be unsure if this is your home or you have to go elsewhere, unsure if you are truly loved or just tolerated. Some of you feel off inside. Having your differences pointed out to you only confirms the worst story you've already told yourself about yourself. To all of you, please know that you are known. Please see that you are seen, and know that here is where you are heard. We can blame these systems, social media, politics, and religion, for creating a call-out culture. But none of them get to the bottom of what's really at stake. None of these systems and tools get to the source of why we feel the need to destroy each other, the need to shy away from grace, the need to pull back from compassion. None of these cultural patterns go to the deepest part of ourselves because they are artifacts of society. They are working euphemisms for groups of people, for collectives of individuals, for bouquets of souls. Friends, if we want to build again, we cannot just look to systemic change. We have to begin with the smallest and most foundational unit. We have to begin with you. We have to begin with me. We have to begin with each of us. We have to begin with our souls. The brokenness we all feel. The lack of agency and power that reminds us of our own failures. The voices in our head that remind us that we are nothing. The ringing in our ear that says we'll never live up to the dreams of our parents or our teachers. The voice that discourages us to be vulnerable. The voice that says we can't be kind, that we have to fear, we have to hide, we have to destroy. If you want to change the world for the better, if you want to tear down this vile culture and build up a better one, if you want to build a good house, God's house, you cannot start with the frame, you have to start with the foundation. You have to build up your soul for the better, to show yourself instead of hiding yourself, to have courage instead of fear, and to heal and not to destroy. And so let us on this day flip the script. Let us build again. Imagine what kind of world we could build knowing that we called people out and that drew them closer to us and not farther away. We could lift them up instead of tearing them down. Imagine what accountability would look like if we called them out in love instead of hate. If we could draw out from each of us the greatness that's already within us instead of shaming us for not yet achieving that greatness. Let us use the best soul system we have to find a way of calling out people, not for how they fail, but for how they might succeed. What kind of world could religion build, knowing that calling out someone could draw them closer and not farther away from the life they dreamed of living? The very best soul system we have is our Torah. And in the Torah, the word for calling out is called Vayikra. It means both to name something and to call upon it. Each book of the Torah uses this word for its own purpose. And each book shares a different facet of God's call-out culture. But the books together and this word Vayikra adds up to the greatest calling of them all. Genesis begins with a calling. In the beginning, God makes the most daring decision ever in the history of the universe. God decides not to be alone. God calls the world into relationship. And on the first day of the world, God said, "Let there be light," and then called the light day and called the darkness night. God called upon the world to be with the divine. And on the second day, God fashioned the firmament and called out again, calling the bubble that allows for everything to live on earth, calling this bubble Shemayim, heaven. And God called upon it again. And so it went every day, until the last day when God created Adam and Eve ate of the apple of the knowledge and hid away from God, and there God called out again, looking for them. The calling of Genesis says that the world matters to God. Each of us is created for relationships. You are made of the cosmos. Your soul potential is infinite. Your life is invaluable. God does not want you to hide, especially from yourself. God is looking for you. No matter how imperfect you are, God is calling to you. In Exodus, God calls us again, using the same word, but this time God is calling Moses from the burning bush. Moses too was in hiding, running away from his past, and God calls him out. Not because he ran away from Egypt, but because God wants him to run back to Egypt. God calls him out for stumbling through his life and asks him to march for others. God calls him from living by accident to living on purpose. God calls Moses out from the past and into the future. God calls Moses out to find the greatness that is inside of him. God calls him out so that he can begin the process of redemption. The calling of Exodus says that your life matters so much that you can't live by accident. And you have to let go of the past so you can seize your future. God calls upon you to hear the voice that is commanding you to find purpose in your life. The voice that says to look for meaning and to drive towards redemption, not just for yourself, but for those who are still enslaved. And God calls again in Leviticus. The name Leviticus in Hebrew is Vayikra. And each time that God is called now, God has gotten closer to the world. From outside the universe to inside the universe to on top of a mountain. And now God calls from God's house to Moses and says, "Come in here. Come close to me." What God wants in Leviticus is your failure, your guilt, your shame, and your sin. God wants those things to take them away from you. God calls you out not because of your capacity for sin, but for your capacity for forgiveness. God calls out to forgive you, to raise you up and not to push you down. The calling of Leviticus is holiness, because there is nothing more holy than taking away someone else's shame. God says, "I'm calling you out, not because you're perfect, but because you're not. I'm calling you out so that your worst moments become God's worst moments. God's no longer outside the world, but inside the heart. God no longer calls you out for someplace far away, but within the very home that we build together, in a good house, in God's house." And in Numbers, we find the laws of our sacred calendar. God calls us out for us to name certain holidays as holy, to remember the past and to create the future. 7 times the word Mikra Kodesh is used to describe these holy days. The calling of Numbers is that of space and of time. You have to make the time to encourage each other. Make time to lift each other up and spend time together. We have to make time for family and for community, to show up for each other. Because what Numbers is teaching us is if you want to create a positive culture, you have to create a positive culture. If you want to create a world of love, you have to create a world of love. If you want to build a world of peace and goodness, you have to build a world of peace and goodness. In Numbers, God begins to transfer the responsibility of calling from God's responsibility to our responsibility. And finally, in Deuteronomy, after years and years and years of God calling out Moses, Moses finally calls back. At the last moments of Moses' life, when he has said everything and has written everything he's ever written, when Moses sees that promised land, the land he cannot enter, he calls out God's name one last time. And here, at this moment, Moses is doing what we're doing today on Yom Kippur. He's asking for forgiveness, asking for each of us to remember that our lives are precious and our souls matter, and a world built on love and our relationships for the next generation, a world that we can see but may not be able to enter, is still possible. Over and over again, the Torah calls on you. God is calling out to you. Every book of the Torah calls out to you in some way. Genesis says your life is precious. Exodus says you have to live your life with purpose. Vayikra, Leviticus says that it's okay to fail. Numbers says you have to make time and take the responsibility to create community. And Deuteronomy says that you have to ask for forgiveness and prepare a world for the next generation, a world you can only dream of but will never experience. God's greatest call, when you put all of these together, God's greatest call of them all is you. Because you are God's greatest gift to the world. And because you are made in the image of God, the Holy One does not put average inside of anyone. You might feel average. You might feel alone, but you are not. You are never alone in the covenant. You have greatness inside of you already to be activated, to be elevated, and to be called out. So what kind of world can we build if we take up this calling, the Torah's calling? What, instead of catching people doing their worst, we can catch people doing their best? You can say, I saw that. I caught you. I'm calling you out for buying that other person's lunch. I'm calling you out for feeding the hungry. I'm calling you out for putting a few more dollars into the tzedakah box. I'm calling you out because I saw you. I saw you take off of work early to go to your son's ball game. I see you, LA driver, giving up that parking space. Maybe not in LA, maybe other places. Let's not get crazy. I see you reading with a child. I see you teaching them to be a mensch. I caught you giving them a hug for no reason, or for sharing your sadness with me, for sitting with a friend in the hospital, for taking a kid in who's lonely and lost into your home. There is greatness inside of each and every one of you, and the Torah calls it out over and over again. You are God's gift to the world, so you can start acting like a gift to other people. To give of your time, to give of your love, to give of your energy. You are called to give compassion, goodness, and sweetness. God calls you out for your greatness so you can call out the greatness in others. This is the kind of culture that we need. We need to throw away the culture that finds joy in another's pain and hurt. We need to throw away the paradigm that judges others only for their faults. We need to tear down this bad house and build up a good house, our house, God's house. We need to hear the calling of the Torah and take our godly responsibility to find flourishing in each other's eyes. This is why God called out Adam. This is why God called out Eve. This is why God called out Moses and why the Torah is calling to us today. God wants what's inside of you, but humanity needs what is inside of you. We all need each other to build a more loving and a holy house together. We need each other to build our house, a good house, God's house. Today, Yom Kippur. It's a day that we reach deep inside and call ourselves out. Today is the day to go into your Holy of Holies and find what God has put inside of you. The capacity for greatness, the capacity for love, the capacity for goodness, and the capacity for forgiveness. This holy day is the day we show up for each other, to love more, to care more, to forgive more, and be forgiven more. This day, Yom Kippur, is a holy day. It's my day. It's your day. It's our day. It's God's day. A day to flip the script, to tear and to sow, to break and to build. This is your day. This is your moment to be called out. Gemar Chatima Tova to each and every one of you. May you have a meaningful day as we approach noon, afternoon, evening, and dusk. A day to flip the script and a day to be called out. Together we say,